What's up, everybody? Joe Ringen here, coming to you today with another book review. You guessed it, another book review. But that's what this channel is all about, right? I love bringing books to you guys, talking about books that I like, sci-fi and fantasy books, finding some books that maybe aren't as well known or as widely talked about on the internet, but are still very, very good. I love finding those from other people's YouTube channels. And so I thought it would be fun to talk about all the books that I love. Hopefully, you guys will pick them up too if they're good, or at least discover some treasures yourself. If I can have any part of helping that, that is awesome. So today, I'm going to talk about a book that's, well, I wouldn't say it's obscure by any means. It's pretty well known, pretty popular. It's not new, I would say. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's actually from a great time of sci-fi books, in my opinion. Some of the earlier ones by arguably the best sci-fi writer of all time. That's a discussion for another day. But for sure, one of my favorite authors of sci-fi, Isaac Asimov, the great Isaac Asimov. He penned this story, and it's within a series of stories called the Robot series, which I'm sure all of you have at least heard of the book I, Robot, or the movie, which actually I haven't seen because I've heard it's kind of different from the book. Also, I haven't actually read the book I, Robot, so I'll have to get to that at some point. But that one is a prequel, sort of, to this series from what I understand. But it's like a collection of short stories, so it's not really like a novel. So I didn't feel the need to start with that. I'll get to it at some point, but I wanted to start with the first book in the actual series, which is this one, called The Caves of Steel. But first, if you like these kind of things, like and subscribe to my channel. Please, let's grow the audience. And then I can introduce you to other awesome YouTubers too that I come across. And also, if you like fantasy books, I wrote one. It's called The Ballad of Ages. Check it out on Amazon if you like fun fantasy books in the style of, I'll say Narnia. Not as good as Narnia, but in the style of Narnia. We'll put it that way. So, how did I get to reading The Caves of Steel? Well, I've been on a huge fantasy book binge. And I just, sometimes I like to take a little detour, a little break, and go back to one of my other loves, which is sci-fi. And so I started watching season 3 finally of The Foundation. I think it's like been out for 2 years or something. Love that show, by the way. Different from the books, but I still love it. That's also a discussion for another day. But then, robots played a little more prominent role in season 3. And then I was just reading up on stuff online and discovered that Asimov actually has like a whole universe of novels similar to like, I don't know if I'll say similar, but akin to like Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff where things are all in the same universe, not all the stories, but a lot of them. And so what I learned online is that events that happen in this Robot series, then also the next one, the Galactic Empire series, which I'll read too, and even characters possibly affect what happens in the Foundation series. Again, if you don't know, Foundation is so good. One of my favorite series of all time. Second only to Dune. It's incredible. It changed my life reading Foundation. And so made me a lover of sci-fi and fiction and reading. And so I'm like, there's more to this series, this universe. I need to read it. So immediately I went on my library's website and put this book on hold and picked it up when it got delivered or whatever to my closer library. And I read this book pretty quick on vacation, actually. It's a quick read. It's like 250 pages, something like that. But it's not, when you think of old sci-fi, it's not super dense. At least this story is not like dense. It's not full of like all this technical jargon. It's very, very um, well written and easy for the layman to read. I think Asimov does a great job of writing in that way because he's a super smart dude. He could he could write like textbooks that no one understands with him, but at least these books very presentable to like normal people like me. And so this isn't this is this story from again what I understand from my limited research. This series is where robots really got popularized in culture. Weren't super present before. I mean, they kind of um, they kind of derived from Frankenstein, and Asimov says himself, like it kind of came from that, creation of man that goes awry. Although the robots in this series, they don't. Well, we'll leave it at that. Um, so yeah, kind of derives from Frankenstein. But also Asimov mentions there's like this Czechoslovakian play called like RUR, which I think was the first thing that ever made the term robot, which actually means compulsory labor. So it's kind of cool to learn these things. Asimov tells us this in the introduction. And so I love that. Um, this book is very clever. So it's a detective story, police story, detective story. We all love those. Fast page turner. He leaves you hanging at the end of every chapter. And it's a very clever story. Like even if you take away robots and all the sci-fi elements, it's a good murder mystery. But really, that's just a vehicle for him to present all his ideas and like philosophies or predictions about the future. And so it's so cool how he can weave those two things. So it's like your brain is just getting mashed with awesome stuff. It's like on the one hand, it's an awesome murder mystery story, and on the other hand, it's like awesome sci-fi, and he can combine those. So it was an enjoyable read to say the least. I love how he presents the future. I won't get super into it, but basically, the world in this future is Earth is super overpopulated. Like there's just these sort of dome cities, ginormous, and like people don't go outside. Everything is just included in the city, in the dome, and there are robots on Earth, and they do labor, service type things. Um, so, but humans, there's a lot of them that have kind of the old style of thinking where they don't like robots for a couple reasons. They just sort of like taboo, right? Some people have like religious reasons against it. Some just like, I don't know if racism's the right term, but they don't like other people that aren't like them, even though robots aren't people, I guess. But so that sort of thinking. But the one that jumped out at me is the predominant thinking of why people don't like robots is because robots are slowly taking people's jobs. So it's like, okay, oh, what does that sound? That sounds very much like some things people worry about today, right? With like artificial intelligence and technology in general. So that sort of dilemma was presented, and it's very smart how he thought of that way back in, what was this, written in like the 50s? So Asimov is quite the prophet of sci-fi. And so that was interesting to read about. So then we learned that there's colonies on other planets outside of Earth. They're called the spacers. They also don't like Earth people. Earth people don't like them. The spacers are like super wealthy people, and so they can live in luxury. They leave the overpopulated, crowded world, and they live in their planets with huge estates. And they're much more friendly towards robots because robots do all their work, so they can just literally live in luxury. So we're in a post-scarcity world that Asimov has built, and especially on the outer planets or outer worlds, I guess they're called, and like Solara and Aurora, I think it was called. There's some other ones, but all the rich and wealthy people live out there, and it's interesting because like there's a colony on Earth, sort of like an embassy sort of city. It's a smaller city within the city where spacers can come because sometimes they interact with their fellow humans, right? There's reasons to, but like when humans go into that space, or they have to be super sanitized, right? Because like spacers this is just interesting to me to read. They don't have an immune system really because there's no diseases, there's no germs wherever they live. It's like a perfect society. And so if they were to come on Earth and they run into people, that could totally just wipe them out. It's like a common cold to kill them, right? So it's very interesting to read about that. And that I don't know. So there's all these crazy things that they go through to be able to interact with each other. But so then okay, so that's sort of the setup, the setting, and then the plot itself is a spacer that's in that sort of embassy city is murdered. And so the main character, Elijah Bailey, he's a human detective, and his job is to figure out who did the murder. And so we get thrown into all these twists and turns, figuring out who did the murder, why, and at the end of it, he uncovers a much grander plot that involves high-ranking officials of the outer colonies, the inner colonies, lots of twists and turns, and it's a big political situation. We'll just put it that way. And so the other thing that's cool is Elijah's partner, Daniil. He it's not a spoiler, it's like in the first chapter, he's a robot. And so that's another thing, like, Elijah doesn't like him, but then he learns to like him and appreciate him, and they kind of become friends. I love the character of Daniil. He was fun. He's, kind of like C3PO, but not as stupid, like, or corny. Like, he's very intelligent and smart, but it's fun to read him because he's very logical and stuff. So, like, just the banter between, like, a New York City cop, which they still live in New York City in this book, but in the way future, New York City cop, and then, like, a robot. The banter between is really fun to read. Also in this book, we're introduced to the 3 laws of robotics, which Asimov has presented. And it's sort of the basis of the whole book and the series going forward, I'm guessing. And so you sort of have that in the plot. And I can remember the first 2 laws. The first law is robot can do no harm to a human. Second law is a robot has to obey every order from a human, in so much as it does not contradict the first law. So, like, he has to do everything a human says as long as it doesn't result in the robot harming that human or another human. I forget the third law, but look it up. So, very clever. It's a fun book, and it's fun to. Asimov's, man, he's such a smart dude, and all the different ideas and stuff about the future and how robots can play a part in the future, which we haven't quite got to yet in our world, but artificial intelligence is kind of like that. And so the dangers and not only the dangers, but like the benefits too. Like, a lot of sci-fi is just preaching against the dangers of technology, right? And that's true. We need that. We need to learn about what could happen if we do certain things with potentially dangerous technology. But there's also, Asimov presents the benefits too, which is really, really cool and refreshing. So you can get both sides. But inevitably, humans are going to mess stuff up, and and we're going to cause problems with technology, usually not technology's fault. It's going to be humans' fault. And so part of this too, like, we learn there's a grander plot, kind of like Foundation. There's like this overarching plot, in that series, but this one is there's a movement where we want to get more Earth people out of Earth and to colonize other planets. So there's that in the backdrop. And I think that's going to be part of the series going forward. I'm not sure, but that's kind of there. A lot of spacers don't want that because they like their luxury and their not being crowded and stuff. But, some smart people, small faction of people realize, like, hey, humanity's going to be wiped out if we overpopulate at this pace. And they sort of like run some experiments or statistical, what do you call them? Simulations. And if they keep going at this rate, humanity's going to just die, basically. So they realize the only way to solve it is to get people to leave Earth and start colonizing. And so that's part of the plot, and the background is trying to get the ball rolling on that objective. So I think that's going to be part of the next couple books, but we'll see. Anyway, so it's a very fun detective story. Awesome sci-fi story. I really like this book. I will say I can totally see how some people would not like this book at all. Um, so despite the cover art of this book, it's not an action book. This kind of looks like a Star Wars cover. Like you see this cover and it kind of looks like, yeah, it could be like a Star Wars type book. It's not. There is so little action in this book. It's almost all dialogue and just like, yeah, very little action. I personally love that. That's my jam. That is my kind of book. I don't need a lot of action. I love good dialogue, and this book is that. A lot like Foundation, because well, same author, duh. Nice observation, Joe. Um, but I love that. So some people could jump into this thinking it's going to be this huge action. Elijah on this cover's got a gun. There's going to be like all this battles or whatever with robots. No, no, not at all. It's a lot of discourse and a lot of philosophical discussions, which again, I eat that up, man. That's my stuff. So if you like that, you're going to love this book. If you don't like that, you're going to hate this book. So take that with a grain of salt. Understand that before going in. So, but if you're like me, you're going to love it. I gave it an 8 out of 10 because it's such good sci-fi, a really fun plot, great dialogue. It's some things though for me were like a little corny, so I didn't give it a perfect. And part of it's just because, like, the Times is written. I think I'm pretty sure he wrote it in the 50s. So like some of the dialogue is super corny. Like Elijah's kid will always say like, what the Dickens and like, oh Jehoshaphat and like stuff like that. It's like, okay, that's just part of the time. But it took me out of the story a little bit and kind of made me laugh. And then when there were like serious moments, I'm like, okay, kind of dumb. The other thing is like this book, there's like one female character, and I'm not one. I don't usually get super mad if there's not like representation of all genders and whatever in books, because the author can write what he wants. The problem with this is I think his one female character in this book was so like wooden and just like I don't know, she's not like any female I've ever met in real life, like would ever act or talk that way. So it's kind of like, all right. That took me out of the story too a little bit. That's Elijah Bailey's wife, Jessie. And yeah, I'll just let you read the book and maybe, I don't know, you'll form your own opinion. But he like I don't know, he tried to add depth to her character, you could tell, but it just totally just didn't work. Like okay, so I'll just say, so example, like her name's Jessie, but her real name's Jezebel. And so she has like this inner conflict or whatever, and her emotional depth is that she always she would fight about the name Jezebel. She liked it because it was kind of like her alter ego, right? Like she was always a goody two shoes, but Jezebel of the Bible is, this like horrible person, and she liked that sort of alter ego. And then when Elijah told her, like, tried to argue with her, like, no, Jezebel was like a good wife. And then first of all, that was like, what? No, that's not true at all. And so like, so then there's an argument, and then she gets kind of pouty because like he took away her one thing in life that made her feel alive, right? Having a name of like a horrible person in the Bible. I don't know, it's weird. So maybe going forward, he gets better at writing that. I don't know. That just was kind of like maybe an editor should have caught that and been like, dude, what? Weird. But hey, it's Isaac Asimov. Who am I to tell him that what he wrote is bad? But I'm gonna do it anyway. So I didn't give him a 10 out of 10 for that, but 8 out of 10 is fantastic. My kind of book. Again, I love Asimov. He's a great writer. His books are good. I'm gonna keep reading this series for sure. They're quick reads. You can read them in a weekend, probably one sitting if you really had like 3 hours. But you can crush through these. So they're perfect palate cleansers, but they're not like popcorn books by any means. They're actually in depth, and you come out smarter. And again, that's one of Joe's laws of reading, right? Number one, come out smarter than you did going in. That means it's a good book. So Hey, Asimov's the man. That's all I got to say about this one. I have the second one from the library. I'm going to read through it. So we'll get a review out of that one pretty soon, too. But so what I got for you guys today, Caves of Steel, Robot Series, Asimov, good stuff. You guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time.